everybody, and welcome to another episode of Hope in the Time of Corona. My name is Matt, and today, on this Friday, I am joined by a very special guest, our one and only James Brown. Not that James Brown, this James Brown.
Hello.
Hi, James. And James is here as the first of hopefully many people from within our church, from within our congregation, who are going to spend a little bit of time with getting to know a little bit, hearing a little bit of their story and their testimony. And James, in particular, is going to be sharing today about his journey with coronavirus. He's had one heck of a year, as we'll all hear in a little bit. So that's what we're going to do today. But James, before we dive into all of that, just very briefly, could you tell us a little bit about yourself? Who you are, where you're from, all of that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so my name's James Brown, And so I'm from North London, and from Barnet, so a bit more north than Islington. And I am a pastoral tutor and just at a sixth form college in King's Cross, and I'm just finishing a teaching qualification as well. And yeah, I've been at Hope Church since February 2019, and that's all I can think of right now.
We are so grateful to have you at Hope, and it's been just over a year, I guess, that you've been with us. And James has been part of our 5 o'clock congregation and in my life group, the life group that meets in this house, and also has helped out with our Torch community and also has helped out with Alpha. And so he's been really involved in the community. So we are so glad to have you at our church, James, and so glad to have you here today to tell us a little bit more about yourself. As I said, you've had a heck of a year. We've all had perhaps not the year that we were quite expecting, but you in particular have had quite a ride. So could you just tell us a little bit about what's been going on for you in the last few months?
So I think, so for me, it was just COVID related, unsurprisingly. So I think a week before the full lockdown happened, I started having COVID symptoms myself. And we are nearly 8 weeks later, and I've just about recovered now. So it was just a very difficult time with because I think for me, I think with everyone the symptoms are all different. Obviously, you still get there's the temperatures, the sore throats, and we know what the worst can be because it's on the news, or we know some people. But for me, it was just kind of mild symptoms, but mild symptoms that just went on and on and on and on and didn't seem to have an end. And I think, the temperature didn't actually kick in until the end of week 2, which was kind of at the same time as things getting more serious in the news. And I think, it was just kind of wondering when it will end, at the same time just being, I guess, stuck in a quite a small flat and having just one other housemate around who didn't particularly know very well, and just kind of feeling a bit marooned and having not many answers from the doctors in terms of what to do or will things get better, and kind of just becoming quite fearful and in a position where you're told that from people with mild symptoms it should be over in a couple of weeks, but for me it was kind of well into a month until a bit more, until I really felt like my kind of temperature and was properly going, and it was just a very difficult time.
Yeah, well, and so now, as you say, 8 weeks it's been to kind of get over it. And that's a really long time for anyone to be ill. And in the process of those 8 weeks, we got to speak periodically. And when we did, I guess, you reported on your symptoms a little bit and said, I got this, aches or pains or a bit of a fever or whatever it might be. But one of the kind of underlying things that came out often was like actually, with everything that's going on in the news and with all the unknowing about it, part of these symptoms and part of what is making this really difficult is kind of more mental than physical.
Yeah, definitely. I think, I'm someone who has kind of suffered with anxiety, got diagnosed with an anxiety disorder about 7 or 8 years ago, and it's just something that I to kind of live with most days, and have learned over the years how to manage. I came off of medication quite a few years ago now, because I just learned a lot through therapy and through things like that. And for me, exercise has been a massive help, and running, and just knowing my triggers and things like that. I've been able to manage it fairly well. But being in a situation like this, I just didn't have much prep for, to be honest. There wasn't anything that I could any kind of strategy I knew what to do with, because it just is so unknown. That's why everyone's kind of generally anxious about it. But for me, it became, I think, especially right during the illness, I think it was as much the anxiety as the COVID symptoms that were all part of the battle.
Yeah, and you were saying earlier when we spoke that this kind of the mental part of the battle really intersected with your faith journey and your journey with God. And so I wondered if you'd mind saying a little bit more about that for us.
So I think my faith journey's been, I'm sort of in my mid-30s now, and became a Christian in my sort of early to mid-20s, and so it wasn't something I grew up in I didn't really grow up in a youth group or anything like that. So I guess my faith as an adult has always been felt really alive, but actually the last few years, I think it's been more up and down. And I think as well, just actually coming away from ministry, I was a youth pastor for 3 years in a Church of England church, and actually I had to learn how to do life as a Christian, just having a secular job, and just things aren't as easy to do when you're not constantly thinking about Jesus, praying on your own or with people, and it's just been hard to get my head around that. But also just asking big questions of life again, around how do you find peace. A big question of mine was, how do you live a life of peace as a Christian, or try and access God's peace when you know that actually anything can happen still? We live a life, just as much as just because you're a Christian doesn't mean bad things aren't going to happen to you. And I think I'd had some bad things happen to me, and I'd had some, close family friends and friends of friends who had kind of died really young, and a friend with an ongoing illness who had such a strong faith, and but actually just at a young age with a near fatal brain hemorrhage. And it just brought up big questions for me, and I just wasn't experiencing a lot of peace. So I think in this time, because of the lockdown, because I couldn't go anywhere, there weren't many people around distracting me, my internet had kind of slowed down a lot, so I couldn't play, FIFA online or anything like that. So finally I actually had to really have it out with God and ask some big questions, and that's kind of what I did. And there's definitely, I was in a bad way at one point, mentally, and there was tears, but actually it was actually at that point where I finally think I really gave it all over to God again, and gave him room to, I guess, speak to me more about it, and to really learn more about what is it to live in God's peace, and to have peace in difficult conditions where you don't know what's going to happen, not just if you're ill, but just in life in general. And I just think for me, I had to think about death for the first time, and it wasn't because logically at that point I wasn't close to death or anything. I had no breathing difficulties, but mentally, I felt more in danger than I'd ever felt. So I was thinking more about death and life and death and mortality. And it was I guess it was realizing that that death is not the end for Christians. For people that eternity starts now. That we have eternal life. It's the whole reason, big reason Jesus died on the cross and defeated death. And actually, it was realizing that such big fear happens because of that fear of death. But I don't have to have that fear if I don't want to have it.
Yeah, no, and yeah. So I mean, I think I know, and I hear a lot of what you're saying. Other people kind of reporting similar things, that in the midst of this crisis and in the midst of some of the quietness of it, that you can't go out and distract yourself. People are being faced with those big questions in life, and for you, those big questions were around anxiety and peace and unknowing, and specifically around health. And so all of that's brought to the fore. And so I guess you have this moment of like, God, how are you going to come through on this? Like, are you going to be there? What's it going to be like? Are you going to prove yourself to be the God that I think that you're saying that you are? And that in the midst of that encounter, you found some sense of peace, some sense of, as you say, I love what you say, that like eternity begins now. That our hope in an eternal life isn't about kind of an insurance policy for after we die. It is a peace which begins now. It's a way of functioning which begins now for us in this world. I love that. I really love that. Yeah,
I think it was just about realizing that. I think it's just kind of switching your lens, really. And when I started thinking about that, I just started to think about my whole life. And I think I'm sure a lot of people have done this, about how would you live life differently now because of lockdown. But actually, it made me just reassess again, as a believer, how do I live life now, knowing that eternity starts now? And are there things I should do differently? And are there ways I should just actually, certain things I need to just stop worrying about, and actually, and then other things I need to kind of grasp more and let go of more. And I think it kind of made me think again about all those things.
It reminds me of something that Chloe was speaking about a few weeks ago in one of her reflections on Philippians, about the Apostle Paul kind of reflecting on the near death of his friend and then saying, now I've stared death in the face and come through the other side. Now I have a new vision of hope. And as we know, the Apostle Paul went on to like transform the ancient world, wrote half of the Bible, or I think partially just out of this encounter with death and this vision of finding Christ and God in the midst of death. It sounds to me like this has been something of your experience also.
Yeah, and I know, and it sounds overly dramatic because I wasn't in hospital, I wasn't in intensive care, and I just really need to reinforce that. But it just, for me, it was just a place of, because of my mental health, that actually mentally, at times, it really did feel really bad. It felt that kind of fear you would experience if you were in those situations. So
And I do think that is key, because most of us, statistically, aren't going to end up in hospital in intensive care with someone having to help us do the breathing. But all of us are facing in some way or other this fear. We're experiencing. I mean, it does feel like a strong word, doesn't it, to say like we're experiencing death, but we're encountering death in a way that we perhaps haven't before, and I think it can open up a way to new life. I was thinking about this earlier and thinking about this ancient rite of baptism that we enter into, and this idea that in our baptism, we are held and taken under the water, and it signifies our death. And then we're raised up. And actually, way back when Christians were first baptizing people, there's like the 5-second rule: hold them under, like make them gasp as if they're going to die, and then you bring them back up, and all of a sudden you go like, gosh, that was it. Life is over, but there's new life on the other side, and now I'm going to live out of that promise.
No, definitely. That's an amazing thing. And I mean, it's just a whole massive representation, isn't it, of kind of what I was saying about it's a new life and it's a new way of looking at life as well, and eternal life.
That's so good. I'm going to use this as a bit of a segue, because James obviously has been thinking about some of the big questions of life and faith and all of that, and come out the other side with a new perspective. And we are just about to begin, as Hope Church, an online Alpha course. And for those who don't know, an Alpha course is a 10-week course asking some of these big questions about life and faith. And it's going to be online starting on the 20th of May during kind of lunch hour. So if you'd like to come along, if you'd like to come and enjoy a bit of discussion, I say come along, you'll still be in your own home. But if you'd like to enjoy some discussion and asking some of these questions, then I really do recommend it to you. All of the details will be out soon. And James, I think I mentioned earlier that you've been involved in our Alpha course. Is there anything you'd like to add about Alpha and whether people should do it or not? I'm hoping you're going to say they should.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it really is a place. So, first and foremost, it's for people who it's really helpful for people who perhaps haven't had much of an experience in church or don't know much about Christianity, but actually it's also just a place to ask the big questions of life and faith and God, and in a kind of atmosphere, in a setting that is very easy. It starts off with a meal, and then someone will either will either speak for a bit, or maybe we'll watch something, and then it's just an opportunity for people to ask as many questions as they want. And there's a real kind of sense of a little mini community, because it runs for 10 weeks, every 1 weeknight a week for 10 weeks. So I think I've often seen it and experienced it myself as a really positive experience. And actually, having led one, sort of co-led one, it was a time for me where I was re-asking some of those questions as well, and so it was really helpful for me too. Yeah,
and I think that holds up, right? So whether you're here, watching at home, whether you're someone who's been in church for a long time and just would relish the opportunity to ask some of these questions, some of the big questions of life and faith, or perhaps you have a housemate or a family member who you could drag along to come and join in this Zoom conversation for an hour in the middle of a day on a Wednesday for a bunch of weeks. This is an opportunity for everyone really to come and grapple with these things. So do consider it. As I say, all of the details will be out soon, but have a think about that for the 20th of May. From us for now, thank you so much, James, for joining me today and telling us a little bit of your story. It's great to hear. It's great to get to know you some more. But that is all from us, and we will say goodbye to everybody watching at home. Bye.